Brooks Sr., your host, and this is Community Forum. This evening we have 4 exemplary guests. We're going to be talking about prejudice, power, and corruption in Lake County. So we have to my far right is Kevin W. O'Connor, attorney, a managing partner, as a matter of fact, of O'Connor Law Firm, Chicago, Illinois. And to my immediate right is Ralph Peterson, Jr., a community activist and investigator in Lake County. And to my immediate left is Lloyd Preacher Howard. And I might clarify that. We call him Preacher Howard. He's not an ordained minister. He's a community activist in Lake County. And to his left is Patricia Axelrod. She's a people's advocate. Good morning, folks.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Pleased to be here, sir.
We're very happy that all of you took time from your busy schedule to be with us on Community Forum to talk about a topic that should be addressed nationwide. Before we get into that, I want Attorney O'Connor to tell our listening audience a little bit about your personal and professional background.
Sure, I'm Kevin O'Connor. I'm a personal injury trial lawyer. I've handled a number of cases, including those involving police brutality, Section 1983 cases that involve a lot of your topic of prejudice, power, and corruption, unfortunately. Up here, my principal office is down in Cook County, Illinois, but I do a lot of work up here in Lake County as well. I've been a large part of many cases up here in North Chicago and in Waukegan. In that area, I think the number is up to about 15 or 16 individual cases of police brutality that I've, in my firm, have been personally involved in. It's an ongoing, growing problem up here, and I'm glad to be here to talk about it with you.
Okay, Mr. Peterson, I want to give you the same opportunity I gave Attorney O'Connor. Tell our listening audience about Ralph Peterson, Jr. I mentioned that, emphasize Jr. because I have a neighbor in North Chicago. It's Ralph Peterson, Sr.
Yeah, that's my pops. Yeah. Okay, I'm Ralph Peterson, and I'm a community activist / investigator. And pretty much in 2011, Darren Hanna was beat to death by the North Chicago Police Department. And I knew him personally. In fact, he was related to me, and I seen a lot of the reports that the officers put out, and I knew that a lot of things that was on the reports was not correct, so I decided to investigate. And during my investigations, I come across some 300 reports, brutality reports, and I haven't been able to let it go, and I'm gonna just be involved in that area for some time.
Preacher Howard, you are 86 years old. You've been around Lake County for a long time. But there are some people that may not know who Lord Preacher Howard is, so I want to give you the same opportunity. Who is Lord Preacher Howard?
I'm a community activist. I've been in this community for over 68 years. And I'm a retired employee from Great Lakes, and I was very active in union affairs, and we dealt with a lot of the racial discrimination, unfair labor practice charges, and that's how I became involved in union activity. I was responsible for representing, as a union representative, I represented 32 cases. I won 28, lost 2, and I had a split decision on 2 cases. So I'm proud to have been in this community this time. When I came to this community, this was a great community. And I would like to leave here with this being a better community than what I found when I came. But things are not going well in that line. So I want to do anything I can to help change it.
Well, thank you very much, because we have always been trained to respect our elders. As a matter of fact, we get permission from our elders to speak. You know, but a lot of things have changed, and we're going to talk about them and see what we can do about them. Now, our anchor person is Patricia Axelrod, and Patricia, we'd like for you you are the people's advocate, and we may want you to, for the people that don't know you, tell us a little bit about your personal professional background.
Well, my name is Patricia Axelrod. I am the director of the People's Advocate. And the People's Advocate is a not-for-profit law project and advocacy project, consumer and patient advocacy project, dedicated to the preservation of the rights and benefits of the poor, the disabled, the disaffected, the disenfranchised. We're here today because we're going to be talking about racism, and by definition, the definition of racism is prejudice and power. Those two combined factors create a toxic mix that the People's Advocate is dedicated to stand up against. Our motto is justice, not just rich, and we are standing for all that is right. I have become engaged in the activity and ongoing psychodrama of North Chicago, where there are some folks there that would look best in a sheet and a pillowcase, if you get my gist. And I became engaged in North Chicago when I learned of the beating of a young boy, a 10 or 12-year-old boy, by a North Chicago policeman. And having heard about that, I attended a demonstration going on to now 2 years ago. I'm fairly new in the area, I might add, whereupon I met the excellent Mr. Peterson, who acquainted me with what was going on with Darren Hanna, and thereafter I began investigating the matter independently and looking into the issue of police brutality in North Chicago, and finding myself aghast at what I learned in North Chicago and in general the means and ways of doing business in North Chicago, where power and prejudice combine, aided by corruption, and that's the mayor of North Chicago, to unfortunately create an environment where justice has a hard time standing up.
Oh, thank you very much. The four of you have spoken eloquently, and but the issue of racism should be the forefront of black leadership throughout this country. As a matter of fact, it should be the forefront of white leadership also.
Better.
And we're going to talk about what is racism and what can we do to eliminate it. It is the most vital and challenging issue because it affects the whole country. I may say this, ladies and gentlemen, we all are from the same dust. Some people may not believe this, but I have never seen a Brinks truck behind a hearse yet. When we go to the grave, we going back to dust. Dust art thou, and dust returneth. Now, there's different types of racism, individual racism and institutional racism, and we'll talk about that as we go along, how costly it is and how it affects our economic system, our political system, and also social decisions are made. I just had a note here, we have the death penalty was outlawed by the Supreme Court briefly, but it was reinstated. Lake County is spending millions of dollars on expanding the jail and the courthouse. And we're going to be talking about who occupy the jail. I want to give my panel a brief test on racism before we get started. And you don't have to raise your hand. You could just jump right in and we'll let you know whether you have a positive answer or not. Number one, blacks and whites should learn to live and work together. Is that a racist statement?
Is that a racial statement?
Mm-hmm. And why?
Well, it's, I don't know what you mean by racial statement.
Okay,
Let me just say this about that.
I'll tell you.
If I might.
I'll tell you why.
Yeah, but before you go on, let me say this about that.
Okay.
There's a great deal of controversy surrounding the issue of racism, and the controversy is this. Do I, as a white person, experience racism? Do we experience racism at the hands of African Americans? Now, there's a question I'd throw out there, which is a torpedo. The bottom line is that in order for either of us to experience racism, you and I, we would have to, the people who are exercising this racism against us would have to have power over us.
Yes. Now, this is a fact. But Attorney O'Connor, same question. Blacks and whites should learn to live and work together.
True.
By its very statement, it involves racism because you're isolating people of whether they're black or white instead of just being people.
True. True. Number 2, Asian students should excel in mathematics. True or false? Why?
Well, because you're stereotyping. And anytime you stereotype, you're wrong.
It's not a race. Asians not a race.
But you're still stereotyping.
Yeah, you're right, you're right. Now, number 3, white basketball players do not jump as well as blacks. True or false?
That's true.
Okay. Rap Peterson,
that's not
we chalk
right,
one up
for
to
sure.
you, but it had to be true because it is racist statement.
It's false. It's obviously false. We have examples of both.
The statement is
Is it a racist
the statement's a
statement?
racist statement.
He's
Yes,
saying
yes,
this
it
with
is.
tongue planted firmly in cheek,
Yeah,
and you know it's true.
So we're going by race here now. That's a different show.
Yes.
Jews are very good at handling money. True
False.
or false?
Bloody well false.
Why?
Because
Not a racist statement. Okay. Number 5, we moving along. Something needs to be done about drugs in the black community. Racist statement or not?
Yes,
of
racist.
course it's a state.
Preacher Howard,
I think
true.
so.
Okay. True or false? Hispanic men try to be very masculine or macho. True
Well-
or false?
Now we're talking about a cultural expression.
Right, it's not a race.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, all right. Number 7, almost all whites want equal rights for blacks.
Bloody well false.
Racist statement. But you're talking about race there. Number 8, is the race a statement or not? Lewis and Clark were the first white men to explore much of America.
False. Well, they did and they didn't. They were Spaniards. They were conquistadores who came around first.
Racist statement, true. They're first white men to
White men. Okay.
Number 9, universities should try to recruit more black students.
It's a racist statement.
Racist statement, true. Number 10, and the last one, then we move along. Most Puerto Ricans receive welfare.
Racist.
Not a racist statement. Okay, very good. Okay, we're on the right track. Now, what I want, at this point, I want Patricia Axelrod to lead us into racism. What is racism, and how can we combat it?
Well, if I knew how we could combat it, my dear, I would be walking on water, but I'm not. So let me just say this about that.
Okay.
Racism, the sociological definition of racism is the combined factors of power and prejudice. And now we add corruption, which is what this program is about. So we here are familiar and cognizant of an extraordinary expression of racism in North Chicago. Now, North Chicago, as we all know, and perhaps as your listeners know, has an African-American mayor.
Okay.
And he sits behind a picture of an African-American president. And here is a man who I would characterize, and I don't mean to shock everybody, but you'd be surprised if I didn't, as you all know me. Here's a man I would characterize as an overseer of North Chicago. What's going on in North Chicago right now could not happen in the absence of racism. If we look at North Chicago, we see a new motto there, and that is that it is the new North Shore. You're all aware of that. It's the new North Shore. And Mayor Rocking Scam, as I call him, is pleased to make that statement, that it is the motto of North Chicago. And let me just say this about that.
Well, ladies and gentlemen,
yes, indeed.
The statements made by my guests are not of the station or opinion of the host.
Yes.
Proceed.
Okay, moving right along. So what we have happening in North Chicago could not be happening in the absence of racism. We have a man, Leon Rockingham, who is committed to gentrifying North Chicago. Therefore, you have the term the new North Shore. And how would that be accomplished, and for what purpose? The purpose would be so that the powers that be, who reside next door to North Chicago, on the lake shore, and these are the powers that be that essentially reign throughout all of Illinois. Those are the Walgreens who are there. Those are the moneyed people, the gentry. Those people, take a look at North Chicago, and you see that it's right kitty corner, right up against it. As a matter of fact, North Chicago is ceding part of its property to Lake Forest, and this was discussed last night. So let's talk about a situation there in North Chicago. We have Leon Rockingham, or Leon Rocking Scam, I repeat that, Mr. Rocking Scam, if you can hear me, sir, sitting at the podium. We have Mr. Chuck Smith, or Charles Smith, or Chucky, as he's called by some, and surely not me.
Well, we can lighten up on these.
Oh, you can lighten up, but not me. I'm not here to lighten up. I'm here to say it like it is. So, Chuck Smith, who is a city attorney for North Chicago, who is a vital instrument in accomplishing the gentrification of North Chicago and turning over North Chicago essentially to the powers that be in Lake Forest. Chuck Smith comes out of Highland Park, where he implemented a clear-cut racist policy amongst the police.
Could I?
Yes, of course you can.
For a second. From what I've seen since I've come into this forum, and you have valid criticisms based on factual allegations as opposed to general things, because there are things going on that are wrong. But it looks like in North Chicago, if you go back almost 15 or 20 years, that this has been an ongoing process where you take a piece of lakefront property, right? You've got a community that owns part of the lakefront, and it was all sold off to various people, or given away to various people over the last 15 or 20 years. So to say it's only been a unique problem over the last 5 or 10 years, this has been an ongoing process that appears, though, to be getting worse instead of getting better. So the people who are there are not doing anything to stop it, let alone make it better. So the answer, and if you look back in history, all of the good land, you'll call it the waterfront, the things where really people would want to develop a shopping center or something like that, are gone, right? They've been given up. They're either given to the Navy, they're given to Abbott Laboratories, they're given away to the big corporations that now own it, and what you have left is a pocket in the middle that nobody really wants. And we all know that, it's location, 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 right? So if you're going to invite community development, you're going to try and move things forward, you've got to do something to right all these wrongs that have gone over 10 or 15 years. But instead of doing that, it's just bubbleizing itself and becoming worse. And that's the real issue. What are they doing to make it better?
Well,
and nothing's
I
happening.
would say this, for the audience, this is the only opportunity, or they have not had an opportunity to get the facts about what is really going on in the background in the city of North Chicago. Now, beyond that, and Preacher Howard, let me finish. Can witness, and just a statement I want to make. Preacher Howard can witness to this, that North Chicago had an opportunity to buy Lakehurst, all the land there, and they refused to do it. So something is happening here that we don't know anything about, but the audience is finding out about it now.
Let me interject this in reply. And I know you're absolutely correct that this is a years-long process. This has been happening under the governance of multiple mayors, in as much as there is an attitude, a prevailing attitude of corruption. But in reply to what you're saying, because I do have my feet on the ground right there and watching what's going on, let me tell you, while what you're saying is correct, what is important to point out is this. The economic conditions that are prevalent in the country, and in particular in North Chicago and the rest of the communities, are lending themselves to what I would suggest to you is a master plan. Now, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean you shouldn't be. This is for bloody well sure. However, I'm going to tell you that I believe there is a master plan to gentrify North Chicago to the degree that the simple working people, the African-American community, the so-called, quote, criminal element, and so forth and so on, will be crowded out. And that is what I believe all of the police brutality is about. I would say to you that this police force functions like a Gestapo at the will of the powers that be. And in order to better understand this, I would suggest to you that you look at Chuck Smith closely, the city attorney. He, as I started to say, came out of Highland Park. Highland Park, and he was the city attorney at a time when there was an ordinance in Highland Park that was called the Nut Ordinance. No N, and I won't use the word, but we all know what word it is, uptown, the Nut Ordinance. And in Highland Park, and this so-called ordinance, and it really wasn't an ordinance, it was an unspoken law, was a law, and it functioned like a law, so that when a person of color, be he African-American or she African-American or Latino, was in and around uptown Highland Park, the police, upon spotting them, would convey this, communicate this information, and this person would find themselves surrounded. And they would be escorted out of town, or they would be beaten up, or they would be hassled. There was a federal lawsuit brought against Highland Park. Chuck Smith, who was the attorney of Highland Park at that time, reigned over that policy. And now he's in North Chicago. I'm telling you that he is there by design. This is not an accident that he is there. They have made a calculated decision to push out poor people, to push out a so-called criminal element, to push out the people who've been there forever, and take over that area. And Mayor Rocking Scam, and I say that, I'm sorry if you folks don't like it, but that's what I say.
You have 3 minutes.
Okay.
You know, you don't want it up.
All right.
How can we combat it? How can we know the problem? We have reiterated and reiterated at the council meeting and so forth the problem. But what's the solution?
Watch what's going on. Put your feet on the ground. Come to the city council meetings. Speak up, and for God bloody sakes, vote. The percentage of people voting in North Chicago is so minuscule that, in fact, someone like Rocking Scam, who conducts himself like the overseer of a plantation, because unfortunately, this is the way that people in North Chicago conduct themselves. They don't vote. They don't speak up. They allow this police brutality to go on. Of 38 police people on the force of North Chicago, some 17 of these police officers have been charged with using undue force. 17. And nobody does anything about it. They don't vote these folks out. The council members all rubber stamp everything that goes on. It goes back to the vote. it goes back to the vote.
So thank you very much. You have a comment?
Yeah,
before
I
she
will
leaves?
agree with that, that the black community is going to have to wake up, because they pretty much, they sit the sidelines and they let these things take place, and that's pretty much a silent approval. And Rockingham and the rest of the officials just seem to take advantage of us every time we sit back. And that is true, and that's also true what Ms. Axelrod brought out about the attorney Chuck. The officers, he was in Highland Park. The officers would get on the radio, and so the listening audience to know what we're talking about. If you think back, Juanita Jordan had kind of put this in the spotlight. Remember when she had brought up charges and got attorneys saying that they were racial profiling. So I view Chuck really as a common denominator, because his hands really is, and I found this out through my investigations, involved in most of what's going wrong. And I know firsthand from attorneys that when the good officers on the Highland Park force would let the would come forth and let their bosses know what was going on, Chuck Smith would actually get angry and send officers home. So I agree with Axelrod.
Well, Mr. Peterson, why do the city council allow Attorney Smith to stay on the council?
Well, I'm going to go back to what I just said a minute ago. The black community pretty much lays back, and they do not get involved. So therefore,
so they should let their
free.
councilman know then that they disapprove of this, so the councilman
Get
would,
involved. Really, to be honest, I put it on Facebook every day. Wake up. There's a lot of apathy in North Chicago where, you know, I'm going to mind my business. I don't have anything to do with it. And that's tearing us up. You've got to get involved.
I would like to hear the history from the preacher. I would like to know, has this been a pattern of 35,000 people roughly in North Chicago and less than 5,000 people coming out to vote? I mean, the federal government and the federal legislatures don't care about what goes on in North Chicago because there's not enough votes to make them care. So has this been a pattern that since I've been involved the last 4 or 5 years, or has this been going on for 15 or 20?
This has been going on for quite some time.
Yes.
I think in the total number of votes, I think that includes the Navy personnel, which a lot of the Navy people voted in their home state. And so that number is not really 35,000 people to vote. That's 35 people that should be able to vote, but they're voting in other locations. So that number is not quite good. But the problem I see is that what wealth we do have in North Chicago, we are considered as a poor community. But all of our money goes to people who live outside the community that come in here and work and make the money and leave. And that is what's downfall, part of our problem.
And isn't that even going on currently with the police chief? I mean, they had rules that you have to live within a certain jurisdiction, and now they want to bend the rules that the new police chief doesn't even have to live even anywhere close to North Chicago.
Right. And that's, and that's because the people won't stand up. That's a good point. He just brought out a good point, and this is something we need to discuss about the chief. Actually, he's under the title, well, actually, I'm going to have to just say it how it is. He's really not the chief. I mean, they've put it in the newspaper that he's this new independent contractor, but actually, they're breaking the law. They can't contract this guy in as the chief. He has to be appointed. And all the aldermen have to do, and this really bothers me, is contact the Attorney General, and they'll find all this out. This guy does not have authority to arrest any sworn officer, discipline any sworn officer. He's actually not supposed to have his weapon exposed when he's at the meetings. And the mayor is aware of this, so I'm going to take it back to what I was saying before. Until the black community, or let's just say North Chicago, wake up and get involved, these things are going to keep happening.
How was the police chief hired back? Was he hired as an independent contractor?
Yes.
Or was he hired as a consultant? Or?
Originally,
An employee.
as an
Exactly.
employee.
That's exactly what his title is, because like I told you, he has to be appointed with sworn powers. That hasn't taken place, and here's what fooled the community, because the mayor chose him, and then the alderman had a vote. Okay, he got the vote, but listening audience, this was the vote. The vote was the mayor saying, can I contract? Can I hire this guy as a contractor, as an independent contractor? And the vote was yes. Now, the North Chicago community think that just because they voted yes, we agree with you hiring this guy. But there's a difference in contracting him in and appointing and swearing him in with power. And he hasn't been appointed or sworn in with power. So like I say, he really doesn't have it. That's an administrative position. And as Mr. O'Connor said, he's just an employee. And the mayor is parading this guy around, all around town to different functions with his weapon, which should not be exposed. He is not the chief, and I'm going to tell you something else. We're going to break the Guinness Book records, because we're going to have 4 chiefs in 3 years. You watch, because this guy is not chief. He's not the chief.
Well, Preacher Howard, I call you Preacher Howard, knowing you for many years, Lord Howard. Tell us about racism as you were growing up. This is not your first experience with racism, right?
No, I grew up in a small town in Missouri, Sykes, Missouri. It's right where Interstate 57 crossed 65. And growing up, I'm 86 years old, and growing up when I was a kid, we read in the newspapers, heard on the radio, we didn't have television at the time, about lynching and hanging and beating and killing of black people during those years. And we heard it, we was bothered by it, but it didn't affect us till January the 25th, 1942, a Sunday morning. A lynching took place in my hometown of Sykes, Missouri. And I was a first-hand witness when I saw angry mob drag a young 20-year-old black man down the streets of our community, through the street. And in our community, there was less than 20 cars in the community. The community is about 10 blocks long and 3 or 4 blocks wide. But we know every car because we knew it by sound, rattle, or sight. You know, it was a poor community. And we had over 2,000 cars driven by mostly white people that drove in the community blowing their horns, and we saw signs up, the N-word, read and run. If you can't read, run anyhow. And I saw people in those cars pointing weapons at the people in the community that was walking from the west end of the town to this. It was on a Sunday morning walking to church, and these were the things we were confronted with. And it was a frightening day, and nobody can, you know, regardless what you read or see on television, it's not like you actually witnessing seeing that yourself. And that happened January 25th, 1942. And at the time, 7 weeks before that, the World War II just begun. And that was at a time that the nation was coming together. We were all for one and one for all. And then on that 7 weeks later, then this lynching took place. And it leaves something in your heart that you'll never, never, ever forget that day, January the 25th, 1942. And we thought that going through the war, fighting for America, to make America the greatest nation on the face of the earth, things were going to get better. But as I see, as bad as things were then, as I see it today, things are worse now than they were then.
All right.
At that time, the bar was set so low for black people that you only had, you know, your expectations was low, so the standards was low, so the bar was low. But we thought we had made gains, and for every time we thought we made gains, we lost. Integration did not help us. You take sports for an example. Before integration, there were 16 or 18 black baseball teams owned by blacks, and they played among themselves. And if a local black league baseball game was playing here in Waukegan and the professional was playing in Chicago, the local teams here were drawing more fans than the professional team. So they integrated. After integration, black players made more money, but we lost all 18 black team ownership.
Yeah.
So we lost ownership for individual salaries to increase. And so it was the same thing in basketball. Many of y'all remember the Harlem Globetrotters, and they all went out of business when blacks become professional basketball. So every time we thought we were making gains, we wind up on the short end. Now the thing that really we need to wake up, they're attacking our voting rights. And they're trying to, in every way, several states, you hear it on the news every day, several states are trying to pass laws to make it impossible for certain people to vote in certain neighborhoods. And that's because gerrymandering, I think, the word they use. But they're doing that. So for every time we thought we gained, we wind up losing more than we thought we gained. And so I would like to see something done about that. And regardless of what race you are, what color, we should come together. In your question that about black and white should come together. And let's do the right thing, not the white thing or the black thing.
What about when you got to North Chicago, the area here? Did you experience racism when you first got here?
When I came here in 1948, I had just got out of the Army. I came here looking for better working conditions, better pay, better living conditions, and to be treated with a reasonable amount of dignity and respect. That was why I came to this area. And I worked for the Great Lakes Naval Base, and when I got here, some of the problems we left in the South was here. And I became involved in the union, and as a union representative, I represented 32 formal cases. I won 28, lost 2, and I had a split decision on 2. I myself was affected by racism, and the definition we had for racism is when someone a leader over you has position to make decisions that would adversely affect you, that's when the racism come in. And so I filed a discrimination complaint, and there was an EEO, and you might have known Mrs. Gwen Jones. She's no longer with us. She was the chairman of the EEO, and there were 15 EEO councils. Because of the person I was filed a complaint against, nobody would represent me. And so I had to defend myself, and I took my case all the way to the top and won the case. And I'm the only man in America that had his supervisor fired, and they forced him to leave government service. And he had 30-some years of service at that time. And a year after that, I was awarded a disability retirement. So I've been retired since 1975. And I'm the only man in America to hold that title. And I did that by representing myself. And I wish I had never had to go through that, but it was necessary because as a result of me doing that, there was never no black supervisors or foremen at Great Lakes. And I was responsible for the first black foremen and supervisors to be promoted at Great Lakes. You know some of them.
Harrison.
Charlie Harrison, yes.
Reverend Brooks, my question for you would be...
Dr. Brooks.
Dr. Brooks, sorry. Dr. Brooks. Sorry about that. The real question becomes when he says now it seems worse than it was before, is the switch that people are now just being thrown in jail instead of being lynched or put up on the thing, and that seems to be the real question, because whether the charges are real or fictitious or they're being angled at certain people where they don't do leniency, you get that felony on your record, you're not working anymore. You're being starved out. So what's happening up in Lake County, Illinois? What's going on with what we're doing up here? What's happening? Are we trying to reduce the number of people in prison? Are we expanding our prisons? What is really going on?
Well, what about plea bargaining? It's a young person can take 5 years instead of 30, so forth. But you plea bargain for the lesser sentence, but it's still the felonies on your record and you serve in time, you know. So and I mentioned before about the courthouses expanding. Who are they expanding it for, you know? And how do we reverse that?
I mean, the interesting side is I do a lot of civil work. And the civil work, you know, everyone talks about congestion in our court system and it's all blocked up and we need to have all these reforms. The civil system hasn't expanded at all. Our cases are pretty small. They're pretty, they're pretty compact. They haven't really expanded up in Lake County, but the criminal system has gone wild. It's almost as if they can't have enough judges to fill all the cases coming in. They're building prisons. It's big money.
That's
You've
right.
got outside influence. You've got, let's expand the prison system. Let's make there more room, bigger jails. Let's privatize it. Let's do all kinds of things.
Key word.
What is that? Because keeping people in prison is big money.
Big money.
So our drug problems, the drug issues, do people really want people to get treated, you know, and cured or helped, or do they want to keep the big business going of what they're doing?
They want to send them to jail. It's $1 billion business now. That's what I'm saying. That was the key word. Now there's a new law where people can privatize prisons now. They're not owned by the state anymore. And the reason why I say this is wrong, because whenever you have a business, you have a product that's in demand. You see what I'm trying to say? Nike, they have a tennis shoe that's in demand. Hinckley, they have water that's in demand. When you privatize penitentiary, the product that's in demand is human flesh.
Was there a judge out east that was
selling? Yeah, that was selling, and that's really going on here now. But here's where it really get deeper. It's really slavery again. It's the same soup in a different bowl. You follow what I'm saying? If you can't send this guy to prison, you slap a felony on his back. So sooner or later, he's gonna do something to get in trouble. And like I say, this is really gonna get ugly, because a lot of big companies are gonna start producing their, I mean, in the words of the Godfather, what was it? They're gonna make your offer you can't refuse. Let's say you own this Hinckley water cup company right here, and you're paying sick leave, annual leave, and all the other benefits that go along with the company. Now here you can have that same product in a penitentiary where you pay a guy pennies. Compared to what you pay. No sick leave, no annual leave. And he's gonna be there. He ain't gonna miss work. You follow what I'm saying? So that's what's happening here.
But it's even worse, because now you add in this police corruption. You add in that whole aspect of people wrongfully going to jail, and we've seen how many cases overturned in Lake County just in the last few years where people were on death row, and the target was the people confessed supposedly to a police officer who they said beat them, and nobody listened to them, or they forced them into a confession. We have police officers on tape beating people routinely, and these people are going to jail because they claim that they hit the officer or attempted to hit the officer, when in fact the people with the tape get exonerated, but the people without the tape don't. So if the thing isn't on. So it's not only a problem of you put more people in jail, but now innocent people are going to jail. And if the innocent people go to jail, our founding fathers had a system. They said it's better. This is why you have more, beyond a reasonable doubt, why you have such a high standard. And as a public person, you don't want to see criminals go free. But they said it's better for one guilty man to go free, 10 innocent men to go free, than one guilty man to go to jail. Because if you're that one man, your rights have been taken away from you for absolutely nothing. That was what we had in Britain. That's why we all came over here, because the king knew all, right? So now we have to reverse. We have 10 innocent people going to jail for every guilty one, and everyone feels good about it as long as it doesn't knock on their door, right? And so we have a reactionary system. And it all comes back to, even in North Chicago. I sat at a city council meeting, and nobody comes on certain days, right? It's the same group of people. All of a sudden, there's a flood. in North Chicago.
Okay.
The water hit their home.
Okay.
Now they care, right?
Okay.
Now everyone's screaming, yelling, what happened? Look, you hurt my home, you affected me. Everyone puts the blinders on and says, look, I don't have to worry about it. It's not affecting me. If they're going out and throwing a bunch of people in jail, well, they're not hassling me. They're not bothering me. So until it hits people's doorstep, people don't want to get involved. But it's that reactionary system that is developed up here in Lake County and specifically in North Chicago, where all the problems are occurring, because when you're reacting to something, you're not fixing the problem, you're just trying to put a Band-Aid on it. And that's what they have.
I agree with you 100%, Attorney O'Connor, and there's more innocent men in jail than there are guilty men in jail, because a lot of young men are picked up and they're charged. The bond is $10,000 or whatever the bond is. They can't come up with the bond. So they plea bargain and say, okay, if you plead guilty to this charge, we'll give you 6 months in jail. You've already been here 4. So you serve 2 more months and you're free. You walk.
Or time served. No more time.
For time served, right. And now, in the meantime, whether he's guilty or innocent is not, it's no longer, he plead guilty, so case closed. So the guilty man is going free, but somebody is serving the time for crime that he didn't commit. And it's more, we should get young men on this program, Brother Brooks, and they will tell you what goes on behind those bars when those young boys are back there. And they have no lawyer, no access to attorneys like Attorney O'Connor, and the best representation they can find. So the cheapest thing is if you plead guilty and take 30 days, 60 days, so you got a record and you go home. But they know eventually if you don't find a job, you're going to be back in the system. So it's more innocent men in jail than there are guilty men in jail.
What about, Mr. Peterson, black leadership, starting out the program? You know, we talk about racism from the Caucasians against blacks. But what about black leadership in Lake County?
That's a very good one right there, because
could I answer that, please?
And I'll answer after him.
There are some. We have some our black elected officials. Some of them are good, nice people and doing a good job, but for most of them, I got a name for them: black blockers. They're there to keep you separated from the powers that be. And you can never go no further than 10th Street, because 11th Street is for another group of people. And so I call them black blockers. They're there to represent us, but they're there to do more holding us back than they are to represent us. And blockers.
Okay.
I have a building that's right down the street from my home, Kugler's Tower. It's a senior citizen. I think that building has 120 apartments in it. At one time, I am a pilot, but I had my own airplane.
You a licensed pilot?
Yes, I am a licensed pilot, and I had my own plane. And an investment company had me to fly him over all the streets, north, south, and east, and west. And as we were going over there, we flew over Kugler's Tower. The guy told me that it's about 110 apartments in there, and the average income for people live there is about $800 a month Social Security. Now, these are not lazy people. These are people that worked all their life, but that when I first started working under Social Security, I was making $6 a week. 6 cents a week went into my Social Security benefits. So over the years, I have, I draw Social Security. But people who come along in my area, their Social Security is $600, $800, $900. But we have 3 people in North Chicago whose salaries are more than the 100 people that live in this building. That is our problem. And the 100 people in this building is paying the salary for 3 people who are making more than they're making. And so that is a problem. Until we learn to deal with that, we have had young people from this community to go off to school and do quite well. Some of them come back lawyers and whatever. Nobody from this community is hired by this community.
Amazing.
And so our money is going out the window faster than it's coming in the door. So that is our problem.
Youngsters graduate from high school, they go away to college and professionally train, and they come back, and the leadership in the city will not hire them?
Not hire.
Well, like I was getting ready to say, We have very poor leadership in a lot of cases because really, for real, we really are supposed to be our brother's keeper. And I'm walking the way I talk. I'm not just saying that, you know. You take a lot of the pastors, and I do not want to bash them. You know, they have big churches. They have say-so in the churches, and a lot of things actually, if not get involved. I mean, that should be a discussion like back in the King days. That should be on the agenda. This is something us as a congregation need to look at, because really, I'm going to tell you the truth. I put this on Facebook all the time. I don't like hearing all that whitey this, whitey, because I've truly come to find out we are our biggest enemy. Because there's a lot we just won't do. You know, like I say, we're there and that took me back to Preacher Howard's story, what he was saying about Great Lakes. Well, what I got out of that story is, here's a black man, or just here's a man that stood up and he got something done in our community.